We have a long episode today.
Hooray!
Yay. And this one is one of the ones where we're going to do a deep dive into science, but we're not going to bore you, I promise. But we're talking about genetics and how they show traits and how they're passed down, and why understanding our DNA helps us make sense of who we are and kind of helps the world be a little bit of a better place, at least for cool stuff anyway.
Yeah. We're going from the teeny tiny parts of you, but like going meta then with like...
Yes, right. Right. I don't have nature news.
I don't have a lot of details, but I'm excited to learn more about this black fungus that's like growing in Chernobyl. Have you heard about that?
Oh, yeah. I did hear about that, yeah.
Creepy.
Yeah. Well, I guess my only nature news that I have is what I was dealing with right before I jumped on this podcast for Laura. Is
the purple finch fiasco.
Yeah, my purple finch drama. And I'm going to have to probably fight eBird police on this one. Purple finches typically aren't found in North Texas.
But she saw one. So now she's
got
to, hold the line and be like, yeah, that's what it is.
Now I have to fight for it. So, because it's rare. But everything, and that's what I was telling Laura. I was like, I even put it into eBird as a similar bird, which is a pine siskin. And even eBird's like photo ID thing was like, that's not a pine siskin. I think it's something else. And it said purple finch, but then you go to insert a purple finch and it's like, whoa. Those are rare around here. We're going to need a lot more detail if you're going to put that in. So I haven't had a rare one that I've reported yet. I've had an uncommon one, which is the last time I got called out by the eBird police, but I haven't had to input a rare one, so this should be...
I've had rare, but usually it's somebody else has already seen it, and I didn't have to write anything.
Yes.
Or I didn't have a picture, and so it was like...
Yeah, I'm not going to fight that battle. Yeah. Yeah, I have videos, and so I took screenshots of it, and I got a call. The audio's a little fuzzy. It's not... Because it was way off in the distance whenever Merlin picked it up. The call anyway, and then I got video of it, and it was hanging out. Like, I did see a lot of pine siskins that day, but their beaks are so slender compared to a finch. A finch has a honking beak,
big seed-eating beak.
Yeah, and so it's super thick. So it's definitely it's a thick beak. So you can definitely tell, but yeah, it's just a weird bird. So we'll see. So I'm ready to fight on this one. I've run it past several other people. And they've said, and they've even reached out to other people who have said, yeah, definitely purple finch. So
bird nerds,
bird nerds unite.
People are thinking like they're either eye rolling or they're into this,
right? Listen, and again, I've said it in one of my videos that I did the birding. I respect what the eBird, and that's just jokingly calling them the eBird police. There are other people that are fact checking, right? Because this is citizen science essentially, and so they're going through and making sure that what people are recording and what they're saying, these certain things are what they are. And I can respect that. But then when you have visual, audio evidence, or somebody else has nearby seen it recently, and maybe they didn't get a picture of it or something, but when you have a bunch of evidence and then they kick it back to you as, that can't be it. It's like, do you have eyeballs? I know it's uncommon, but like, look at the evidence before you here. So I respect them, but at the same time, gosh, is it a pain in the butt when they kick it back? Because sometimes I've had people bounce it back that are really nice and just great, and they're like, hey, I don't think this is quite it. Can you check into it? And so they're super nice. But then other people are like, I don't think that, and they're just like so rude about it. And I'm like, gosh, don't be that way. Like, we're all on the same team here, people. So anyway, all right, you ready to talk about some DNA?
Yes, please.
All right, well, I'm going to do a very high-level overview of what DNA is. Laura then is going to talk about inheritance and genetics and how it's passed down and everything. Then we're going to bounce back to me. I'm going to talk about DNA today and kind of the different things we're doing with it. And then Laura's going to wrap it up with just why all of this is important.
Yeah, so listen to the end to figure out, if you can't figure out why you should be listening. Listen till the end.
Yes. Gotta wait to the end to find out if it's worth it to listen and pay attention. Okay, so before we go into inheritance and what genetics means for us, we need to, like I said, start with the foundation of what DNA actually is. And again, not in the textbook way. If you guys haven't listened to any of our other deep dive episodes, we try to keep this interesting that you can walk away with, anybody can walk away with and be like, hey, I have a little bit of a better understanding.
Right, and plus, like, we figure you all have a baseline biology knowledge at this point, because most of our listeners are out of 10th grade. So...
Yes, yes. But how many of you, how long ago
retain
was
it.
10th grade?
Yeah. So, like, this should ring some bells.
So, yes, hopefully. So we're going to give you just enough to look under the hood, because DNA, it isn't like magic, but it is really cool information. And so DNA, this one, hopefully you guys will remember, it stands for deoxy...
It's a bad start.
Talk today. I did this the other day. Too, and I don't even remember what I was saying. That I'm like, am I having a stroke right now? Because my brain, I couldn't say it. It's not like a stutter. It's just like my brain can't form the word. Deoxyribonucleic acid. That's going to be close enough, because I just have to steamroll through it. All right? So, seriously, though, recently there have been some things where my brain can't function right, and I'm like, is everything okay? Because
you're like, I need a scan.
But that sounds really intense, but all it really means is DNA is the instruction system that tells living cells how to function, build, repair, keep everything running.
It's the blueprint for your entire being. Like,
everything.
Yeah.
Yes. Every living thing on Earth uses DNA in some form. Plants, animals, bacteria, you, me, same basic symptom. So DNA is stored inside of our cells, specifically the nucleus. That's the control center of the cell, all right? It doesn't just float around freely. It's carefully packaged, organized, and protected, because cells really care about not messing that stuff up. Like, it knows. And there is some, of course, there's always a freaking exception, because it's science. And there's a small exception with mitochondrial DNA, but we're not going to go down that road. But just know that most of your DNA lives in the nucleus, doing its job quietly and constantly. Now, before we dive any more into what it actually is, I just wanted to give a quick pause, because this part really never gets talked about correctly, about who found it, because more and more information has come out over the years. So want to clarify who did what when. DNA wasn't discovered by Watson and Crick like a lot of people were told growing up. The first person to actually discover DNA was a Swiss scientist named Friedrich Miser in 1869, which is crazy, because that's decades before we really knew what DNA even did. So Miser was studying white blood cells taken from used surgical bandages, which is disgusting. And he noticed a strange substance in the cell's nucleus that wasn't protein and it wasn't fat. He called it nuclein because it came from the nucleus. Yeah. So at the time, no one thought much of it. Proteins were considered way more important, and DNA was basically ignored for decades, because you don't know what it is. You don't know what you don't know at this point. And then, so it wasn't until the early-ish 1900s that the scientists realized, like, oh, hey, this isn't just some goo in the nucleus. This is something important. And so then, and only then, do Watson and Crick enter the story in 1953, when they described the double helix structure of DNA, who used all the critical data from Rosalind Franklin, whose work made that discovery even possible. So Miser actually discovered DNA. Rosalind Franklin revealed the structure, but then Watson and Crick described more of the model. Rosalind Franklin was like, this is how it looks. But Watson and Crick were really the ones to do the deep dive of this is specifically what it is. So very different contributions, very different roles, all important, one leading into the other. But Watson and Crick kind of always get the credit for everything. Not completely true. So what does it look like? Like I just said, you've heard about the double helix. That part is real. If you've seen Jurassic Park.
I was just going to say that. Yeah.
Dino DNA. It's the little guy, and he's a double
little twisted
helix.
ladder.
Yep, a twisted ladder. That's all. That's really all it is. And the sides of the ladder are structural backbones, and the rungs of them are made of chemical bases. And there are only 4 of those bases: the ATCG, the adenine, thymine, cytosine, guanine. And they pair up in very specific ways. A always pairs with T, so adenine always goes with thymine. The cytosine is always with the guanine, and that's it. That's the pairing role is huge because that's what allows DNA to be copied accurately. And cells duplicate DNA constantly.
All the time. Yeah.
And they do it with surprisingly very few mistakes. For how often it's done, it's impressive how well they do.
Well, right, and that there's no brain.
Yes, yeah.
This
exactly.
is all autopilot.
Correct. Yeah, because your brain is in your own head. That's all made up of this stuff too.
Yes.
But so it's not like creatures in there doing. Yeah, it's all like you said,
it's just autopilot. Yeah, that's
which
bananas
is
to
nuts.
think about.
Yep. So DNA versus genes, because this is a very important clarification, and this can get confusing quick, but then also kind of leads into what Laura talks about. Okay, so think of it this way. DNA is the entire instruction manual. Genes are the specific instructions inside the manual.
Yes.
So not all DNA are genes. Genes are part of DNA that contain instructions for making the proteins. And proteins are where basically the real action happens, because proteins build structures, move molecules, send signals, and basically keep your cells from falling apart.
Yeah, like the DNA is the blueprint, but the protein is what is being built and what it all means.
Yes. So, yeah, DNA, it stores the information, the book of it. Genes are the specific step-by-step instructions. Proteins do the work. That's how it's laid out. And so then how does DNA get used? Again, very, very high level here. In its simplest form, because I'm trying to connect the dots to then what Laura's going to talk about inheritance, so you guys kind of always see how this is. So you have your DNA, then you have RNA, and you have protein. DNA really doesn't do anything.
Yeah. Like you said, it's just the manual.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't swing the hammer to make anything or flip a switch. It, like Laura said, it's the manual. It stores the instructions on what to do. Those instructions are then copied into RNA, which is basically like a working version of a recipe or a working version of the instructions.
Oh, yeah, I like that.
And
like a
something
snippet of
the
it.
cell.
Right?
Say again?
It's like a snippet of it.
Well, yes and no. It's like more of a tangible, I guess, as you could say. So if like you're looking at like a book is your instruction manual, RNA is something that's a little bit more tangible.
Yeah, or like you've ripped out a page of it to use.
Yeah. If you ripped it out page to use it. So RNA gets read by the cell's protein making machinery, and that's where the proteins then come in. So here's the key part. Proteins are the builders, workers, machines of the body. They build structures like muscle fiber, skin, hair, bone, act as enzymes that speed up chemical reactions, send signals between cells, turn genes on and off, help cells move, divide, and repair themselves. All kinds of stuff. So when we say DNA builds an organism, what that really just means is DNA provides the instructions, but proteins actually carry out the work.
The building, yeah,
the actual building of it. So different instructions lead to different proteins, right? So different proteins lead to different structures, behaviors, functions. And you don't need to memorize all of that. If you just remember, DNA stores the information, RNA carries the message, and then proteins are the ones that actually make things happen. And that's how
they make things happen, and they're what is being built at the same time.
Yes, at the same time, which again, that's just craziness. So why small differences matter? Well, we're not going to get completely into it yet, but Laura is going to talk about that in a second, because most human DNA is incredibly similar, over 99% same across all humans. But there are tiny differences. Like we said, there are some times where there are hiccups in that duplication process because it's constantly duplicating, constantly. Anytime a cell dies, anything, that it's constantly being remade, redone, constantly going through and constantly being read. And so there are some things that kind of hiccup, but for the most part, it does what it needs to do all the time, consistently and constantly, even as you're sitting here.
Yeah.
Like,
crazy to think
so
about.
Yeah, Laura, that's it.
No,
that's
that was
overall...
perfect. Man, we're covering like an entire college course in 45 minutes. That was a really good synopsis.
Yeah.
Look up some models. Okay, so now that the instruction manuals that Katie was talking about, the DNA, then this has to translate into something. So inheritance of genes and traits was my favorite part of genetics class because Katie and I both had to take that for our major. It's kind of cracking the code of why things are the way they are a little.
This is the class that I also took with my now sister-in-law, and I never had time to eat lunch in between from one class to another. So she was a real pal and always brought me lunch. But my lunches, it started out really small, like a snack, and then it just kept bringing me like more and more food.
I'm pretty
the
sure
point I would.
You sat behind me.
Yeah, I did. I sat right behind you. That was one of my core memories because it started as she brought me some pierogies, and then it just kept expanding from there.
I'm pretty sure this is the class where I was told I have to stop raising my hand and let other people take a chance to answer a question. Just
to be fair, it was
shamed.
like a 1 o'clock class.
Yeah.
I'm back there eating. Everyone's tired.
Half asleep, yeah.
Yeah, half asleep because it's genetics.
And I'm just trying to throw the guy a freaking bone because nobody else is raising their hand.
Yeah, nobody. To be fair, he was the notoriously tough professor. And then we were everybody in there was either zoo bio, pre-med kids, biology. And so this was like one of those classes where we all came together, but it was cool, but it was also
hard.
like a
hard class.
Yeah.
So Katie went over what DNA basics, including what genes are. And like she said, these are the things that make us us. All those little ladders, all the double helixes, they're squiggled up and bundled up together into little units called chromosomes, which I'm sure you've all heard of before. All living things have chromosomes containing their DNA, but how many and what shapes they are can be very different depending on the organism. Like, we don't all have the same amount, and they certainly don't even look the same. So some organisms have one set, some have pairs, which is what we do, and some even have 3 copies. Inheritance is when the chromosomes containing all the genes are passed down from parent to offspring. So quick note, that inheritance of genes usually depends on if we're talking about sexual or asexual reproduction. So I wanted to hit on that real quick. Because inheritance happens with both, but it happens very differently depending on how these things are getting mixed up or if they even do get mixed up. So again, this is passing chromosomes from parent to offspring. So first, asexual reproduction. It's the simplest version.
It would be so much easier for humans if we could do this too.
Yeah. This is the I don't need no man scenario. As there is no second organism mixing in their genes. So it's just a parent organism creating clones of themselves. Creating nothing but clones is a risky gambit, though, because that means that in theory there is no variety among those organisms, making them incredibly vulnerable to issues like disease, environmental impacts, things like that. Mm-hmm. If it's all the same, then that's it.
Yeah, one's messed up.
Once we lose one of our bananas are done, because all bananas are clones at this point.
Yes.
Totally different tangent. Thankfully, nature mixes things up a bit with natural mutations that occur within the DNA, even if it's a clone. So even if it's a clone, it still might not be exactly the same because mutations can occur. So that's when the DNA is being read, and that RNA, or the RNA is being read. Something happens, a mutation means that basically a hiccup, like Katie had said, a hiccup is a mutation. Could be bad, could be good, it's just something different.
Yep.
So, sure, that sponge is supposed to have the exact same genes as its mom, but the process of splitting, coding, and creating the DNA is a tricky process, and lots of stuff can go wrong. So little mistakes can happen, create slight variations, making the little clone not an exact replica. And sponges are asexual reproducers, that's why I said a sponge. All right, now, more complicated. Sexual reproduction. And I'm not about to explain the birds and the bees to you all, but I am going to explain how inheritance works when you add another organism to the mix.
We've talked about sex in several other episodes, so if you just search...
go refer to that. Although we've never talked about the actual deed.
We've talked about some really funny...
Yes.
No pun intended, but we beat around the bush quite a bit. So...
Oh my.
I mean...
I like that euphemism. Yeah. All right. So, sexual reproduction is a process that combines the genetic material of 2 parents. Each parent adds something to the newly created organism. So this creates the most variety of traits compared to asexual organisms and can expedite adaptation, so it makes them happen faster, survival, and ultimately evolution. So we're only scratching the surface today, so I'm going to talk about this mostly in terms of humans from here on out, because again, like, nature gets crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when a male and a female reproduce with humans, They each send out one set of chromosomes that combine when an egg is fertilized. Okay, so we have pairs, meaning we get 2 of most genes. The exception to this is the pair of sex chromosomes. And so if you are female, you have 2 of each gene still. And again, guys, this is crazy surface level because there are exceptions to this. If you are female, typically, I should say, you have 2 of each gene still because you have an XX chromosome. If you are male, typically, you have 1 set of a certain gene on the X and 1 set on the Y. Why does any of this matter? Because having 2 of each gene is a huge help, because if one is defective, it might not cause that big of an issue because it can still be coded on the other chromosome. It's basically you've got backups, which is so cool. Your body's like, this one's junk, let's use the other one.
Yeah.
So mistakes don't happen. They could happen a lot more if we didn't have doubles. So adding to this double gene situation is that even though you have a pair of these genes, they may actually be different versions. So yes, you could code for them, but they still might be coded a little different. Easy way to talk about this is blood type. So you have a specific gene group. It's a group too. The thing about genes is sometimes it's like a group of things to present a trait. We'll talk about that in a second, but
yeah.
You have a specific gene group that codes for a protein on your blood cells on chromosome number 9. On one set of this chromosome, your gene might code for A, as that is what your mom had in hers. Because remember, you're getting 1 from mom and 1 from dad.
Yep.
So let's say your mom gave you an A on chromosome 9. On your other chromosome 9, your dad might have given you a B. And so you're actually going to have AB blood type.
Whip out the Punnett squares, folks.
Yeah. So, like, you can... Sometimes the genes are exactly the same on each chromosome. Sometimes they're slightly different. These gene variations are called alleles. Another little buzzword. So we get a variety of genes for both of our parents that mix together to create us as unique individuals. The possibilities of this recombination are mind-bogglingly huge. Though we can sometimes make predictions about traits, which is my favorite part of genetics. Like I said, kind of like cracking the code of what to expect. There are a few traits that show up because of just one gene. This simplifies things and can allow us to track these traits through generations. This is actually how the entire principles of inheritance was discovered by Gregor Mendel back in 1866. So you
with his peas,
right? And you were talking about Friedrich. Who was it? When was the guy who discovered DNA?
Friedrich Miser, 1869, I think it was.
Okay, so this guy didn't even know that DNA existed. It wouldn't even be discovered, and then they didn't even know what it meant for a while. So in 1866, they didn't know DNA even existed.
Nope.
He knew that something, though, caused us to inherit traits, and he could track those in his infamous pea plants.
Yep, all the peas.
I loved it. He saw that his pea plants had predictable hereditary characteristics that could be seen, which he called phenotypes, which is just the way it presents.
Wasn't he like a monk or something?
He was.
Too?
He was totally a monk.
Okay.
He just had way too much time on his hands. I'm
yeah,
glad.
I mean, to be fair, yeah.
Yeah. So what could be seen was determined by the gene, which is a genotype. A phenotype is how it looks.
So yeah, because he wasn't exploring where Miser, he was microscopically looking at this stuff. Mendel
this guy is
just
just looking at how it shows up. Because
Yeah, he
they
was,
didn't
like,
actually know that there
breeding-
was anything inside.
Yeah, he was very intentional about breeding his pea plants and the outcomes of, would it be a wrinkly pea?
Yeah, like
or
if I
a
mix
fur
these
pea?
together, right. Yeah, will it be
Yes, what are
wrinkly?
the-
Will it be yellow?
Yeah.
Will it be...
Yeah, and so this is where when I just made the joke a couple minutes ago about saying Punnett squares, because if you guys remember, it's whenever you make the box and then you try to do like what are your likelihoods, your percentage likelihoods for the different traits. And so he was looking at it, from an external. Okay, if I breed these 2 pea plants, what am I gonna get? Am I gonna get a dark green pea, or is it gonna be more of a yellow pea? And so he did all kinds of stuff to show, hey guys, there's something going on here.
Yeah, and because of that, just with his pea plants, he came up with the principles of inheritance. So here's what he came up with. 1, the theory of heredity. He knew we somehow get 2 factors for each gene. So he knew that we were getting 2. 1 from each parent.
Yeah.
And then he also came up with the principle of segregation, which means during reproduction, traits are separated into reproductive cells. So what makes me, is being separated when I'm reproducing, which makes sense because I'm giving 1. And then lastly, the principle of independent assortment, which is different traits are inherited independently. And we know now that they're on different chromosomes, and that's why. But he just knew that it wasn't always together.
But just imagine, guys, like he figured this stuff out from pea plants.
Yeah, nothing with microscopes. There are exceptions to all of these because nature is just like that, and we know a lot more than we did in 1866. So take what he came up with. Yes, it's a foundation, but there are exceptions.
Yeah.
Real quick, an example of these traits, things that can be coded for with one gene. So that's how he came up with them. Pea plants are simple, okay?
Yes.
Most of us, what makes us, we cannot predict because it's multiple genes expressing themselves.
Yes.
But
and then you have recessive and dominant
Yes.
genes. And
But one of them is rolling your tongue. That is a
Oh, yeah,
one
yeah, I
gene
remember this
thing,
one, yeah.
which is so crazy to think about. So
Yeah.
like if and it's dominant, which means if any of your ancestors can roll their tongue, that means they're passing that one down and everybody can roll their tongue, which is so cool. Sex-linked genes, which means the genes that are on those X's and Y's, are also easier to track because, like I said, there's just one of each, at least in a male. So colorblind is more common with males because that is on their chromosomes. And we've got two X's, so mistakes don't happen as much. We don't end up being colorblind. But if you've only got one of each as a male, problems happen. How our traits appear, though, is typically not black and white because traits are influenced by multiple genes.
yes.
Life is not that simple. So lots of potential outcomes depending on combinations and mutations. Example of this, eyes and eye color. So that's at least two major genes and several minor genes. You cannot really reliably predict eye color. You can try,
no.
but
Yeah.
not really. Like it's more complicated.
There's still like the likelihood if
Yes.
both your parents have brown eyes, the chances are you're gonna have brown eyes.
Yes.
However,
Don't like divorce your spouse because they come out with a different colored eye.
yeah, because
Yeah.
yep, that means nothing. Yep.
And alleles, remember that I said, which was the variation between those two things, they can also be dominant and recessive, which Katie talked about a few
Yep.
seconds ago, meaning that dominant genes can overpower recessive ones. And it isn't coded and doesn't show up, okay? The only way that a recessive one does show up is if you get a recessive one from each parent, and then no dominant are present at all. They can actually also be co-dominant and act differently based on multiple factors. And this can allow a gene to hide, and you have no idea if you have it since it isn't expressed in a way that we can see. So good old Punnett squares can help us visually track certain things, but it is not foolproof.
Yeah, and then that's not even environmental factors too
Oh,
that
yeah.
we're finding out is like how much that affects
Mutations and things like that.
mutations, and everything. Because again, the more we're finding out about, for instance, like chronic stress and what that does on your body. That's
And your
an
DNA.
outside. Yes,
Your
that's an
actual
outside
DNA,
pressure. And it really alters you. And so what does that then do? It affects your kids in passing on their DNA down the road. And so it's not just my stress, but they're looking at now, what did my parents go through? Like how stressed were they? And like, how did that alter? Then they get passed down to me. So yeah. So it's crazy nowadays what we know about it.
Yeah. So, I mean, all this to say, living things pass down genes to offspring. And due to either mutations, recombination, or both,
Yep.
we can resemble our parents, but are also always evolving and changing. So we're going to look a little bit like them, but we're not going to be clones.
Yeah. Cool. Well, then I'm going to go right into kind of what we're doing with genetics today and the different ways we're utilizing it, different ways we study it. Because thankfully, we don't have to just rely on pea plants anymore.
Yep.
So that's always good. Alrighty. For most of human history, like we've been talking about, DNA was invisible. You figure this is 2025. It's been less than 100 years.
Yeah, that's nuts to think.
Yeah, less than 100 years that have we actually known. But oh my gosh, I just realized too. Do you imagine? Okay, calling all science nerds. If we're still around for 2053 or whatever it is, whatever year we determine the 100-year mark, we better go all out with some sweet DNA merch.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's got to be a year to celebrate because that's pretty cool. But anyway, yeah, less than 100 years out of our whole existence have we actually known what DNA is. And then when we knew it existed, we had no idea what the heck to do with it. And has definitely changed. Modern genetics is really about tools, all about tools, how to read, how to compare, and sometimes how to edit DNA. And almost all of these tools, like I said, are incredibly new because even whenever it was discovered, there was a long time we didn't know what to even do with it. We didn't have the right tools and technology to really do anything.
Yeah.
So when scientists talk about quote unquote reading DNA, what they're referring to is the sequencing, figuring out the exact order of A, T, C, and G along the DNA strand. And I'm sure you guys have heard of the Human Genome Project. So the human genome contains about 3 billion base pairs. And for a long time, that felt impossibly large. And it is still very large until the Human Genome Project, which was completed in 2003, so not very long ago. And it was led by scientists like Francis Collins and Craig Venter. It took over a decade and billions of dollars to sequence the first human genome. And I remember when that was like a huge announcement. Like, we have finally done it.
You know what makes a human a human. Yeah.
Yep. But today we can do it faster, cheaper, and with far, far, far more precision. So sequencing doesn't tell us what DNA means. It tells us what it says.
Yeah.
So interpretation then comes much, much later.
Yeah, you'd have to do so much comparison between people and
So once DNA can be read, scientists can compare sequences. This allows researchers then to spot similarities and differences, identify genes and gene regions, understand how certain genes function. And one important thing to keep in mind is variation is very normal. It's literally how adaptations happen, how we evolve. And most genetic differences between people really, truly don't do anything dramatic. They're just part of being human.
Yeah, sometimes mistakes that happen don't do anything to your body.
Right? Yeah. And so it ends up being genetics truly is less about finding the quote unquote perfect DNA and more about understanding patterns. So one of the biggest, I would say, modern uses of genetics is, of course, in medicine. And we're not trying to predict the future in medicine as far as like where humans are going and things, but more so to make informed decisions, because genetics testing today can help identify risk for certain diseases, understand how someone might respond to certain medications, which is called pharmacogenetic genomics. Yeah, pharmacogenetics. I don't know. I'd never heard of that before.
Yeah, me neither.
It can also diagnose rare genetic conditions. Now, this doesn't mean genetics gives certainty. It deals with probabilities, not guarantees.
Yeah, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this, about why it all matters, too.
Okay. Yeah, that's all I really say about it. So DNA can tell doctors what might happen, not what will happen. And then genetics outside of medicine, it's not just about humans, right? Because we use genetics for anything that's living. So in conservation biology, we study genetics to maintain genetic diversity of endangered species. We use it in agriculture to improve crop resilience and disease resistance. And now that's gotten a little out of hand nowadays, but we also use it in microbiology to track disease outbreaks and antibiotic resistance. So we can kind of predict what's coming up, like when things are just becoming antibiotic resistant and how things are getting stronger and stronger. We also use a lot of genetics in forensics to identify individuals, relationships, and at crime scenes, whatever. So in all these cases, genetics is truly a tool for understanding biological information. So editing DNA, I'm sure you guys have heard the term CRISPR, CRISPR. And CRISPR was originally discovered as part of bacterial immune system, which is bacteria use it to recognize and cut up viral DNA, essentially.
It's the way that they cut up their own stuff.
Yeah. And so scientists Jennifer Doudna and Emilio Carpenter, hopefully I said that right, helped turn that natural system into a precise genetic editing tool, winning them the Nobel Peace Prize in Chemistry in 2020.
It's so amazing. Terrifying.
It is.
Or terrifying could be terrifying, but also so freaking cool.
Yeah, so cool. And so at its core, again, it's a natural pattern, a natural ability that they just mimicked to then we can help control it. So it cuts DNA at very specific locations, and it can also remove, replace, or insert sequences. So it's powerful and still being carefully studied and highly regulated.
Yeah, because can you imagine the ramifications?
Yep.
Sky's the limit. We could insert anything we wanted to human beings. Do I want to glow like a jellyfish? Yes, I do. Do I want to have,
listen.
You know what I mean? Like it could be things that are silly, but also like things that are crazy.
Yes.
And then like consent, do we make baby? Like there's so much. The ethics.
Yep. And I was just gonna say, I was like, this is where the ethics part comes in, because ethics is huge, and that's why it's so harshly regulated. Because as much as, okay, we've talked about so many different times, right? We would not be where we are in science if the crazy and the mad scientists did what they did before us to really learn.
Yeah.
However,
if we can limit the mad scientists,
there's a lot of, there's a lot of oversight now. So we can't quite slice and dice people. If they had something like this back in the early 1800s, late 1800s, they would literally be making all sorts of things. Like, let's give this person, let's make them glow. Let's have them do this. We talked about, it was one of the early, I think it was the first mad scientist episode we did way back in season 1. And that's where we were talking about how we studied a lot of the nervous systems, was because somebody put a like a butt plug, electrified butt plug up, to make a corpse dance. And it's so stuff like CRISPR, because it could be really good, but we can also do some really bad things with it. We have to make sure that it's highly, highly regulated.
Oh yeah, this just reminded, because the CRISPR thing, it's been so in the news lately, because we're constantly finding new stuff to do with this. Because I remember they're taking steps towards curing Lou Gehrig's disease and things. Like, there's like diseases that they think they can eliminate.
Yep. Which again, that's
of like
beneficial.
After the fact that you're born. Yeah.
Yes.
Just cut it out, make me whole.
Yep, which is incredible strides, yeah. So what genetics can't do, though, and this is important, because genetics does not identify a single trait, like Laura said, for complex traits. So it isn't as easy as, like Laura said, like, we've identified certain diseases, where they're caused and where they're coming from, but it's not as simple as, and it's not as cut and dry as literally cut and dry it. Like, it's not that simple.
Yeah, what if you accidentally cut too much?
Yep. We can't, and it can't, like I said, this
come out, and you might never be born then.
Right? Exactly. Yeah. Other things, like I said earlier, you can't override environment, developmental, or experiences that people have. Like I said, the effect of stress and trauma and things like that have on your system, and that has it on your DNA and your body, that has ramifications. And so we can't control that either, because it is what it is. So DNA, again, can provide information, but biology as a whole kind of decides how that information ends up getting used. So now that we've covered what DNA is, how it gets used, and how modern genetics allow science to do it, Laura then is going to wrap it up with how this information and why this is so important for us.
Yeah, so why does any of this genetic stuff matter? You should have been listening, and we've been talking about it the whole time, but real quick. Besides just being fascinating, understanding genetics helps us understand ourselves. That's kind of what we were saying at the beginning. Once we understand certain things, we can understand maybe why we are the way we are. Mm-hmm. So knowledge about inheritance can have some serious ramifications. It's cool to know what you got from your mom and dad, but sometimes it can literally be a matter of life and death.
Yep.
For example, does one of your parents have a hereditary disease, or has one popped up in your recent ancestry? If so, is this disease caused by a recessive or a dominant allele? Knowing this information can help you prepare for your own potential health issues and take precautions. It can also help you make informed decisions about having children or not. Knowledge of our specific DNA can also uncover potential health issues, and may be the only way of knowing these things if someone's adopted. Like, then in that case, if you don't know your ancestry, you have to get your DNA read and find out that way. And it's literally the only way to know it. Mm-hmm. We can understand our ancestry through DNA, and it helps some people reunite with family that they might not otherwise have found. Separated siblings, adoption, feeling of connection to ancestors and distant relatives, and paternity tests. That is our identity in many cases.
Yep.
But all knowledge is a double-edged sword, as it always is. So some people might not want to know about potential problems, as this will cause a high amount of stress for something that may never happen.
Yeah.
For example, personally, the first time I got pregnant, I was in my early 30s, and the risks weren't as high, and I was like, I don't want to know. I'm not doing it, because regardless, I'm having this baby, and it will only cause me stress. This time around, because the risk factors were higher, and I asked the doctor, I was like, will knowing help them be more prepared for birth?
Yeah.
She was like, yes. I was like, okay, then let's do it.
Or like for my family, like we have a lot of breast cancer and pancreatic cancer in my family. Like my dad passed at 50 years old from pancreatic cancer, which is really freaking young for pancreatic cancer. And so I had talked to like my brother and sister, and I was thinking about getting the test because there are some tests you can do that look at your genetics, and you can see if you're more likely to inherit that gene. My sister didn't want to know at all. My brother said to tell his wife, and then she can decide whether she needs to tell him or not. I ended up not going through with it only because it was like $1,800 because the insurance didn't cover all of it, but also because that's whenever talking to a geneticist, I found out that the type of pancreatic cancer my dad has is not the genetic kind. It's pretty much environmental. Oh. And so then I was like, oh, okay. If I get breast cancer, cut off the tatas and that's it. But for me, I would rather know, where my sister's like, nope, don't want to know. My older brother's kind of on in the fence in the middle, where he's like, I only want to know if it's going to be bad. And so tell his wife he's a physician assistant, and then she'll determine when and if she should tell him, kind of thing.
Yeah, right. And DNA tests can split families apart if it turns out you aren't blood related. Sometimes people want to know. Sometimes people don't want to know. Sometimes,
because especially back in the day with our parents' kind of generation, man, Ancestry.com, that unraveled some step siblings galore. Like, so. And
sometimes our highly sensitive information is compromised. And now tons of companies of who knows who has information on our DNA.
Yep.
Which has happened. They've accidentally been hijacked or sell it.
They just recently had a hearing on all of that because 23andMe, I think, was selling it, and even the CEO could not answer the questions of them being like, okay, people agreed to you having their information. You can't sell your company because then you're giving the information, and nobody consented to their information being given to somebody else.
It's literally your DNA. It's like, I can't imagine anything more private.
Right.
It's my genetic material. Genetic information is extremely powerful and has the potential for incredible good and incredible evil, as we were just talking about. And again, that all comes down to ethics and what your own ethical code believes in and things. But we can save lives, potentially eliminate diseases, solve crimes, and so much more. But we can also use genetics for discrimination, which we have in the past. Potentially create designer babies, which is terrifying.
Which is nuts.
And rely too heavily on genetic information when making decisions about certain things. Because Katie said, sometimes it's just, this could happen, not it will happen. So some people's lives can be destroyed from just the potential. Yeah.
Yeah, a could.
So we just have to remember that knowledge is knowledge. This is like a blanket for our entire podcast, right?
Yes.
Knowledge is just knowledge, and we just have to make sure we advocate it for its use in a just and ethical way.
Yep.
That's how I wanted to end it. Just remind, be ethical.
Yeah. And again, it's really cool stuff. And
so cool.
And there's so much, like Laura was saying, like there's so much that comes up in the news recently. There's just always stuff happening. I mean,
recently we have made some crazy strides, though. I keep seeing things in the news that is, guess what? We think we're going to cure this. Guess what? We've done something with this. And I'm like, wow, like we're really hitting our stride with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, thankfully we are. And so we're making some really good progress in giving answers to people.
Yeah, just definitely critically think about it all too.
Yeah.
Like, because that's what it really is too. It's amazing stuff, but think about it. Don't just read it at face value. Not for whether it's even true or not. What does this mean and where is this going?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, exactly. All right, guys. Well, that is our DNA episode. Hopefully, I don't think that was too in the weeds. So. I have this angelic glow behind me that hopefully doesn't destroy it in editing. Yeah, right. Anyway, all right, guys. So go check us out on Patreon and support us there if you can. It would help us to keep this podcast moving forward. And until next week, we'll talk to you guys. Follow us on social media and stuff.
Later.